Welcome to the Steve Fox Show, where it's you and the law, where you have the grand opportunity to make a phone call, ask a legal question of two attorneys, get some quasi-free legal advice. No charge. Tonight we're extremely honored to have Sir David Jefferies, one of our local attorneys on. David, welcome aboard again.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure.
David, like myself, does a great deal of family law. And during this holiday season, I thought we'd start out by talking about how people can avoid divorce, even though that's how we make our living, or at least avoid a costly divorce. David, what are some of the recommendations? You know, I know the two of us really are for family units, and I know we do the divorce to resolve disputes for people that just can't seem to get along. But nevertheless, I think we try whenever possible to put people back together. What are some ways someone perhaps can avoid these type of confrontations?
Well, I think the first thing that people have to accept is that discovering that a relationship that they had hoped would work out very well and would provide them perhaps with a foundation for most of their life, discovering that that relationship is now dissolving for whatever reason is obviously going to be a point where they're going to be frustrated, they're probably going to be somewhat angry, they're going to feel a little powerless, and unfortunately the family law process, as it's conducted within the legal system, doesn't have one line for people who are happy with life and another line over here for the angry ones.
I think it's set up to be an adversary situation and doesn't really push people back together.
It doesn't, and it doesn't even really give them an avenue to get the frustration and anger out. I mean, how many times have you sat in court and seen somebody representing themselves who's obviously very spirited about the subject they're talking about, basically take what might have been a fairly useful argument, a fairly good position in front of the judge, and because of their emotion and their anger, simply annoy the court so much that they don't end up getting what they want.
And that divorce is more of a division of property than, as you said, airing your emotions. And I think the other problem is people tend to start airing their dirty laundry. And the problem with that is that if you start hitting each other even more and pushing your feelings out in public, when you decide to get back to have a working relationship because of the kids, even if you aren't married, those new hurts are going to be there for years to come.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you see a couple that's in court and you glance down at their paperwork and you notice that they've got a 2-year-old, they've got a 4-year-old, they've got a 10-year-old, a 2-year-old. That means these folks have got to work together for the next 16 years.
Sure.
And here they are, and with every word, it's a thrust to the heart with the most piercing sword they can find.
Touché.
Yeah. How are they going to sit down and work out parenting arrangements? You know what we see at this time of year is we see a rash of people running towards Department A14 with, "Oh, I'm not going to get the Christmas I expected." And they expect Commissioner Siegel to sit down and on very little information at all, at the very last minute, make some call that will make everybody happy about the way Christmas went, which is an impossible chore to do.
Well, normally the they call is you divide, either one gets Christmas Eve and one gets part of Christmas Day. But I think, first of all, they should think ahead as much as possible and not wait to the last minute, because it clogs the courts. And everybody's always saying, I didn't get this visitation or I didn't get that.
Sure.
If we have them create a working relationship, then they're going to see it's beneficial to enhance the relationship with the other parent.
Absolutely.
The kids are going to appreciate it. They're going to respect the parent more. It's going to build trust between the parents. I know we make our business on the other end, but if at all possible, even if you can't stay married, at least keep the working relationship going.
Well, if one brings children into the world, one must accept the responsibility that you are going to be a role model to that child. Now, if that child watches you and your former spouse committing hara-kiri in front of the judge, the neighbors, the lawyers, and everybody else in town, what kind of a model does that child have to help the child figure out how to get from being an infant to being an adult with some success?
And I think that goes in line with the holiday season, where instead of fighting, they've got Christmas or they've got Hanukkah, and it's a time of giving, where we reach out to the other side and, okay, they're 10 minutes late. Let's be a little patient here.
Sure. give patience. It's a very welcome present in virtually everybody's life.
It doesn't cost a cent. It's a no-cost gift.
It is, and we both spend a lot of time in court strongly advocating the positions of our clients because that's what they hire us to do, that's what we're good at, that's what we do. And when people hear attorneys talking about, well, you need to work it out, you need to get along, often the public looks at us as, well, you're the reason people don't work it out and don't get along is because you hired guns and you go in there blazing. That's not true. We should be given the credit for being able to help people see the issues that are worth going to bat for.
Sure.
Right. And then we don't advocate to people that if there's something that they genuinely feel strongly about and it's a legitimate complaint.
Pick and choose your battles.
Sure. What is more foolish, and I know you've seen this one too, than two adults sitting there paying maybe $500 an hour in fees to two attorneys arguing over the $40 lamp.
Point of personal grudge, and that's what it tends to be.
Sure.
They're hurt and they want to hurt back, which is a normal human emotion. But sometimes you're going to say, I got to stop this. This isn't achieving anything, and it's costing money that could be used for better purposes.
For their children, for instance.
You know, I think if and that's why we could go into low-cost divorces sometimes. But we actually, and I know you do too, we try to save our clients money whenever we can. We're not there to just generate paper. Yes, there's necessary discovery and necessary things that have to be done. But if we can save a couple grand where they can use it for a college education for one of the kids, more power to it.
Oh, absolutely. And as an attorney, of course, your clients end up really appreciating that. And that's what helps you build a reputation, and that's what helps you build a good word-of-mouth type network in your community, as being somebody who sees perhaps more clearly where the future is headed and helps clients be better prepared for that future. The folks that are unfortunate enough to have 4 or 5 children, and
well, I would say fortunate to have that many kids. Each child is a blessing.
Absolutely they are, but when they find themselves in a divorce situation and they have the responsibilities of having those blessings, certainly, and cannot find within themselves the ability to only fight the battles worth fighting, it is such a disaster. It's such an immediate disaster that lasts for such a long time and has such an effect on everyone concerned, from the baby that's months old at the time it happens to the parents, to the grandparents, to the extended family. It is simply outrageous to have people spend thousands of dollars litigating, arguing, fighting in court over something when there's such a more obvious need with a family of that size. And yet, day in and day out, you can walk into any family law court in LA County and you'll see that happen.
You know, I think to give compliments to the attorneys in the family law court, a lot of them are very professional. We know what we have to do is advocate for a client, but also do what's in the best interest of the child. So a lot of times we will talk to our client and say, again, we have to do what the client says. Let's find a middle ground. Let's be creative and find a win-win visitation schedule. And I think that's what we have to do. We're not there to, you know, I was in with Attorney Paxton one time, and we got into, I think, a vicious, fortunately, battle where I came in and found his client had a warrant and had his client arrested in court. He did something and had one of the kids put in the mental hospital. And I think at the end of it, we looked at each other and said, you know, we're doing what the clients want, but we're tearing apart this family. I think both of us stopped right there and had a nice talk to our clients that this isn't going to go where it should. It's going to use up a lot of money, a lot of court time, and you're not going to resolve the differences. And I think when the two attorneys actually, we came to our senses, we weren't just advocates, and we talked to our clients, we found a middle ground.
Well, there's an old saying that I don't really remember exactly about there are young, aggressive lawyers who have limited success, and there are old, successful lawyers who are not as obviously aggressive, but there are very few super hyper aggressive old family law lawyers, because the fact of the matter is that is not aggression for its own sake, arguing for its own sake, being demanding and inflexible for its own sake is not a blessing either to the client, nor is it much of a position for an attorney to take if he really wants to work in a community and have the ability to reach the point you just described with your relationship with Mr. Paxton. If attorneys find themselves going in there with some sort of a personal scorecard about, well, have I won a case against this person, or did I lose one last week? That is just that's really absurd. That's so far from the better part of what can be accomplished. In many ways, we are like firemen. Nobody comes to us unless their marriage has been on fire and destruction has taken place.
Sure, we get built-in problems to start with,
right,
and then it's up to us to resolve them.
Well, right, but we're not in the business of rebuilding the marriage. There are some fine people up here.
Some of the ministers, the preachers
and,
in the area.
And they should be consulted. They might help many people save their marriages, many more than who go to them, unfortunately. But our job is to save what's there to be saved, to stop the destruction, to be able to look at two people and say, look, if we can help you have the flames die down, get the anger under control, get some cooperation started, and get the two of you back on your feet and better prepared for whatever the future brings you. And hopefully, what the future brings is some form of cooperative parenting plan between people who share children.
You know, sad is sometimes I see in some of the out-of-town attorneys where they build up the bill so high, the local ones don't, and what happens is then the client can't afford it, the attorney drops them, and they got two people left without attorneys sometimes. Or sometimes the other side drops their client, and I'm the only attorney, and I sit the two of them down and say, look, now that you've used up all your money, let's sit down and solve this. Mm-hmm. And more often than not, I end up with a stipulated agreement where I resolve their disputes, I find a middle ground. When I'm in court, I just advocate my side and I battle. But when I'm out of court and my client really wants a resolution, I try to work out their differences.
Well, we sort of have to take on two mantles at once. I mean, by far the best way to accomplish the end of a dissolution of marriage case is by never visiting the courtroom and simply...
I was just going to say that.
Two attorneys sit clients and settle this thing.
You don't have to go to court to do a divorce. We do what's either called a marriage settlement agreement or a stipulated judgment, where we've worked out the assets, the liabilities, the custody, the visitation, the date of dissolution. We can work out the details. We can file, both of you can sign it. We can file the paperwork. It can get signed by the judge, and you never have to see the inside of a courtroom.
Right. And the difference between somebody who spends $2,000 and accomplishes that to complete the end of their dissolution of marriage case, the difference between what they get and somebody who spends $25,000 to $50,000 battling down to the last piece of cutlery
or napkin, sure.
There's no difference. Neither one is more divorced than the other one. But you're going to see scar tissue emotionally on a ton of people when that happens. You mentioned out-of-town attorneys, and that's a bit of a pet peeve of mine. You have a right to select an attorney to represent you no matter where they are, but I am amazed that people of significant intelligence and experience in life do select attorneys from out of this area for a couple of reasons. One is it's a known fact that if you want to hire a gentleman from Beverly Hills, his overhead is probably going to be 10 to 20 times what either one of us pay.
Not only does he charge more per hour, but he charges you for his freeway therapy we give him from Beverly Hills all the way up to here.
Right.
He's used your entire retainer sometimes on the first hearing.
That's right. He's not driving that Mercedes-Benz for free, folks. You're going to pay him his regular hourly rate, which may be $300 to $600 an hour.
For driving.
Right. And he's not going to pay you $300 to $600 an hour to drive. You may want to ask yourself why you're paying any attorney to do that. By and large, most police officers will tell you they're not impressed with attorneys'
You know, the interesting
anyway.
thing is that there are two proper jurisdictions for a family law dispute.
Sure.
Either downtown LA, which is the main court, or where we live in Lancaster.
Right.
And it's not who files first, it's who serves first.
Right.
So if your spouse works in the San Fernando Valley or LA and they're about to get an out-of-town attorney and file down there, you want to beat them to the punch.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying you want the divorce, but you want to control your costs. You want to control the jurisdiction. You want to have it local for you. Because let's say they work in the Valley or LA and you file down there. what's it going to cost you either to force one of us to drive down there or the more expensive LA attorneys? And every time there's an emergency, you've got to leave your job here down in Lancaster and go all the way downtown LA.
The other thing is, too, the group of attorneys up here do battle when battle is necessary. And I think by and large there are very, very few that ever step into a courtroom with the intent of trying to prove something that is personal to them.
I think we've gone past that point.
Yes, but look what happens if you drag in somebody who typically practices law in Santa Monica, and I just picked that out of the blue. But he's going to come up here. They do tend to, not all of them, but many of them, look at us as if we're ill-educated, underqualified, and ill-prepared.
Big surprise for them.
Right. There are attorneys up here who can manage very nicely against anybody in Beverly Hills.
We have
Wilshire
family law
Boulevard.
specialists. I've got Lexis on my computers to get the up-to-date
Sure.
law. I know you're up-to-date on your research too.
Absolutely, and we don't back down from taking a case, no matter who the attorney is on the other side. I have complete faith in the staff that I have working for me.
You have a staff of 14 now.
It's around that number, but it's not the size that matters, it's the quality of them.
And I would go on that. I've got a staff of 5, and I think we can win and hold our own against any LA firm that comes down.
But the point I was going to make is this. If you and I are on opposite sides of a case,
And
we
we
don't
have
have
to.
anything, oh yes, quite often, we don't have anything to prove to each other, and there's not going to be any useless posing. There's not going to be, I'm not going to be unduly aggressive to try and impress Steve with anything. Steve knows what I do. I know what he does. Now, if Fred comes up from heavens knows where, and he's trying to show all us Antelope Valley attorneys how the real hotshots from the big city do it, you can bet Fred's going to be, well, he's not going to win, but there again, Fred's going to be doing a number of things that actually are pretty wasteful of his time and therefore your money. There is considerable talent in the legal field up here, and I speak of family law, but there are some very, very excellent lawyers up here in the personal injury field. There are,
I'll tell you how intelligent they are. Things pulled on me that I was actually impressed sometimes by the other side. One time we were fighting for jurisdiction, Attorney Bill Koch and myself. My client was out of state, and he was hired by somebody from out of state. And we were avoiding, my client was kind of avoiding being served by the out-of-state case so we could establish California as a jurisdiction. Well, he forced a depot, and when my client showed up, my client got served. So, I've been impressed with the creativity of our local attorneys as well.
That there is not a sleepy old fool in the bunch, believe me. And when people come out to the Antelope Valley from other places and look around and they see the wide open spaces and they make comments like, where do you tie up your horses? Or, my, you have electricity. That must have been fairly recent. We don't aggressively confront them and demand apologies or anything silly like that. But most of them end up usually being a little embarrassed that they were foolish enough to take that tack, and most of them don't come back.
Now, David, sometimes to costs, now I always represent the client who retains me, I'm always very clear about that, but if they have one attorney, they can avoid twice the costs, and I say, there is a conflict problem sometimes, but that way, I'm finding inexpensive ways for people to get their divorce.
That's an excellent point, and that we could do hours on that. And I think in the past, one of the things that was most unfortunate is the State Bar, who is the licensing authority that controls whether or not you can call yourself an attorney in the state, at least before the courts of California, has made some statements, some decisions that tend to make that a little bit more dangerous for a single lawyer than I think was necessary.
Yes. I would agree with that. With that, unfortunately, we have to go to a break. And again, when you come back, feel free to call 726-0382 and ask Attorney Jefferies or myself a question. Welcome back to the Steve and David Law Show, where you have the opportunity to call at 726-0382. Get some free legal advice from two of your local attorneys, where if you call our office, obviously we have a consultation fee, except in personal injury on my side. but I do charge for family law.
A man of many talents.
Yes.
I have a few simple ones and just family law.
You're an expert, and I admire your expertise.
I'm an expert until I make a mistake the next minute.
I like to lull you into a sense of. In fact, we have our call for tonight. This is Attorney Steve Fox with Attorney David Jefferies. Can we help you?
Well, you sure can, Mr. Fox. This is Marion Jefferies. I'm
Well-
actually just calling to say how handsome my husband looks tonight and how much I love him.
Well, that's very sweet.
How many more shopping days till Christmas is it?
Merry Christmas, sweetheart. I love you.
I love you too, sweetheart.
You too, Mr. Fox.
Thank you. That was very nice of you.
That is also on.
Bye, handsome baby. Bye.
Take
Bye
care,
bye.
Marion.
That lady, not only am I very fortunate to have her as a wife, but as far as a people person, I have never met anybody who can take people who are going through the emotions.
Now, let's point out that she is your main secretary.
No, she's not. I don't have secretaries. She's one of my case managers.
Oh, okay.
11 years experience and a heart of gold and an ability to make people see the light at the end of the tunnel when they think life is pretty darn dark. Great ability to help people.
And may I commend my staff while we're complimenting our staffs. If
And
they're
I would
listening
commend
out
your
there.
staff, too.
I think they do an excellent
They
job.
are. They're first class.
And again, they work late hours.
and
both of us do.
this is a job where if you don't have great quality people assisting you, it sort of reminds me of we are to some extent. Maybe we're at the tiller. We get to steer the boat a little more often than other people do. But if there's nobody rowing, you're not going anywhere. And it's the people that get into the legal business, the family law business, and they have no desire to become an attorney at all. But they get into it, and they get a little inspired by it, and they start dedicating themselves to becoming
To helping
really
people.
high-quality folks. Yeah, I've got a group of people that I wouldn't trade one of them for anybody else. As a team, they are the reason that my firm has any success at all.
Mine works night and day, and I think that's part of mine. I appreciate it. Late hours, and thank you. I know they're there now.
They are. You've got great people.
Going
too.
back to the ways to not have an expensive divorce, and I've seen, our average divorce is around $2,000, but I've seen outside attorneys with $28,000 bills.
Oh,
and
sure.
Totally ridiculous.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying there aren't a time when two rich people get together and they want to battle and waste their money, fine. But again, we're there to resolve a problem. What do you think of paralegals? Are people starting out that way, or what's your sense on that?
Well, I must take my cue from what I see happening in Department 14 on a daily basis. I believe as of the beginning of this year, if you want to offer yourself to the public, you have to be able to prove to the state bar
Your bond.
that you have an attorney supervising you.
Or a bond, I think it is.
Well, I got to tell you, it hasn't made a difference in the Antelope Valley yet. How many times have you sat there? I've sat there numerous times, watched some well-intentioned person coming up. They've got all their paperwork. They're saying exactly what the paralegal told them to say. And Commissioner Siegel has to look at them, and sometimes he's shaking his head in bewilderment slightly, but usually because he senses the frustration that this person has because it's not done properly.
I'd say it's a mixed bag. There's some good ones out there, and there's some that do you more of an injustice. I've had to redo paperwork. It was more costly to redo the paperwork than if I did it right the first time.
Sure. I was an auto mechanic in a former life, and
Were you happier?
I was dirtier.
Okay.
When people go out and try to fix a car and they don't have any idea what they're doing, and then they bring that car to you to have it repaired, inevitably, it's going to cost more to put it in the kind of shape it needs to be in than if they just towed it in the first place. And that is also true in the law. If people use inadequate assistance or they attempt to do something they're just not any good at, they're going to become frustrated. And frustrated people do not have quick, efficient, and final divorces. They have nasty, drawn-out, expensive ones.
There's two books in the library, and Cheryl Yole's got a website,
and a good
which
one
is actually a good one on how to do the divorce. But what I saw, there really aren't shortcuts. You can try to, use one attorney. You can try to cooperate. The two richest people I ever had didn't have two attorneys. And one of them was related to Howard Hughes. They sat down, and one of them got $12,000 a month, by the way, with $25,000 quarterly payments. My client.
I imagine she was pleased.
Well, she was pleased, but what she could have gotten, we were dealing with fantastic numbers.
Right.
But, they had the most inexpensive divorce I'd ever seen because they sat down, they worked it out, they came to me and said, Steve, and I knew them from years before, they go, this is what we want.
Well, it isn't brain surgery. If you look at the case, starting off with the least important matters, and then working up to the issue of children, which is clearly the most important matter, what I like to do on some cases, and you and I have done this when we've been making voluntary settlement conferences when we've had our clients there, is if you look to start the conversation with something that you think everybody can agree to. The standard one is, well, why doesn't the wife keep the car that she usually drives, and why
That makes
doesn't
sense.
and the husband? And what you do is you kind of develop for the people that are involved an appreciation for, it's not that difficult to start agreeing on things. If you start with the issues that are not the red hot ones and develop a sense
what you can
of
agree on
possibility.
first.
Sure. Quite often when I try to assist two people, and again, we haven't even scratched the surface on sometimes how difficult that can be. But if, given that this is possible to do in this situation, I'll ask them, I'll say, well, make a list of all the property that you have, and put a red check mark next to the things that you want and a blue check mark next to the ones that you don't really care about and your spouse can have without argument, and then let's see what's left over with no check marks next to it. Well, my experience has been 85% of the time they agree with each other. It's almost a case of not being able to see the forest for the trees. I'm angry with this person because I think they're threatening my relationship with my children, and therefore I can't agree with them on anything. When that happens, everybody loses.
Well, you've stirred another member of our public. It's Attorney Steve Fox with Attorney David Jefferies. Can we help you?
Yes, Steve, I know you for a long time. I voted for you. You're a terrific lawyer.
Well, bless your heart. Thank you.
Anyway, my question is this. If a person has been divorced quite a while and she's already married, does this other person, the man, is he still obligated to pay spouse support?
Well, those are two questions. When another person gets remarried, it depends who's paying who, first of all. If someone gets remarried, normally they're not entitled to spousal support. But if the other side, and you're paying the other side, and they haven't gotten remarried, even though you have been, then you still have to continue spousal support if it's a long-term marriage. Child support continues till the children are 18 or graduate high school. David, you want to give some input?
Yes, that question is difficult because we don't know if in the instance that you're talking about, ma'am, that was there a written agreement where there was some agreement to pay spousal support, or was the spousal support being paid as a result of a judge's order? Now, if somebody's been paying spousal support for a significant length of time, 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 years, California has a policy that somebody receiving spousal support has got to make an effort to go out there, if possible, if reasonable, and become self-supporting.
That's on the short-term marriages. And let's draw the line. Long-term marriages are 10 years or more. Short-term are usually under 10.
But
although there's arguments going both ways.
Mr. Bigler, John Bigler, an excellent attorney in family law up here, has an argument before the court right now that he wishes the court to consider that the policy of becoming self-reliant may extend to long-term marriages also.
Yeah, I've heard that, and I understand that too. And you're married to someone, you guys go through the knocks of marriage, and you do still have an obligation even after you get divorced to ensure someone becomes self-sufficient again.
Or at least makes an effort. If I may ask, how long has the support being paid for, ma'am?
Well, this has been a long time. She's already married. Already married, and the kids are already on their own. They've been married, and she's still collecting.
Now, she's married to another man, and she is still collecting support?
Yes.
That's totally wrong.
Okay.
Unless there's a written
If
agreement.
she's married, normally, unless you agree otherwise, it terminates her ability to collect the spousal. And if the kids are, normally, again, if the kids are 18 and have graduated high school, she doesn't have a right to collect for them either.
Right, unless her ex-husband signed an agreement that said, it doesn't matter whether you get remarried, doesn't matter if the kids turn 18, I'm going to have to pay you this
Now,
money anyway.
There's a new form where, that you can just file with the court, and the judge gets it and says, oh, support was supposed to be terminated, and they'll sign and terminate it. I used it the other day, and Judge Ito signed and terminated support
Sure.
on a one page that I filled out. So,
Steven, how much would you charge to fix this problem?
well, what I'd like to suggest is that you either give me a call or David a call at our office, our different offices, and let's take a look at it. And it may be simple. Today I was able to terminate support for my client. He'd already paid 14 months too long. So with one form I terminated, then I made a motion, I got the overpayments back.
Right,
Thank you.
right. There is.
Thank you very kindly. I appreciate
So
it very much.
do give me a call. My office is 726-5151. And David, your number?
942-824-7.
We appreciate it. We hope to be hearing from you.
Thank you.
Take care. This is Attorney Steve Fox with Attorney David Jefferies. Can we help you?
Yes, I have a question. I was living with a girl for over 2 years, and I bought things that was only in my name, and now we had split, and I was wondering if I can go take her to small claims to get all my stuff back, because it was all in my name when I bought the stuff.
Were you married at all?
No.
Well, then small claims is probably the best avenue for you, except they have a limited jurisdiction of 5,000. Anything over that, you'd have to go to Superior Court if you wanted some equitable remedy, like give me back the car, or give me something specific. But again, we do not have common law marriage in the state of California.
That's true.
There was a Marvin versus Marvin case that where people owe each other, but just by living with each other. But that really hasn't blossomed very much.
That is really a contract case. The Marvin case, people think it's got it got the nickname palimony, which is very unfortunate because it reminds people of alimony. And it turned out that what happened in that case actually had a lot more to do with promises made and contracts made. Now, in your case, sir, what you're really talking about, if there's property of any significant value here, if you're over the $5,000 limit, is you're talking about what is called a partition action. And just as a partition sits in a room, dividing one part of the room from the other part of the room, what this lawsuit does is it says, look, there's property here, we're not together, we need to put the partition into this property so I get mine back and you get yours back. And if there's a debate, that's something a judge would in fact listen to evidence on.
But again, if it's under $5,000, small claims
Small claims, absolutely.
is probably the best place to go. If you are the plaintiff and you win, the other side has the right to the appeal. If you're the plaintiff and you lose and there's no cross complaint, you don't have the right to appeal.
Okay, do I have to show receipts and proof and all that?
The burden is always on the plaintiff, to be perfectly honest with you. So it's your burden to prove it, which is interesting then if it ever gets appealed. It gets appealed straight from small claims to Superior Court, and you have to redo the case all over. But barring that, small claims is a full litigated case, and once you've proven your case, or they don't show up in default, you win, and you get what you requested usually.
Okay, what happens if she don't pay when the court tells her to pay?
Well, then you have different remedies. You can put liens, you can have a creditor's hearing, you can do a forced sale on property, you can do an attachment on bank accounts. There's a number of collective. I think David Anvil represents most of the collection companies, and he'd probably be the best attorney in that area, I would think.
Okay.
Anyway, we thank you and hope to hear from you again.
Okay, thank you.
Attorney Steve Fox and Attorney David Jefferies, what can we do for you?
Good evening, gentlemen. Wanted to ask your opinion about the position of family court. Quite obviously, is cattywampus 94% of the custodial parents in this country are the mothers, statistics tell us. And I was rather disturbed by recently Attorney Mr. Cooley said that with the new courthouse being erected, that quite clearly local and all Valley people should elect local attorneys to serve in the commissionerships and the judge, etc. capacities.
Well, let me answer that one for you. I'm a little concerned when you get a downtown LA attorney becoming the judge up here that doesn't know our community. And I actually like local attorneys becoming judges. Once they become the judge, they have to give up their practice. So it's not like they have they've given up their conflicts. And as for that percentage, I have a hard time with it because, frankly, I see the judge going with what's in the best interest of the kids for the most part. And a caregiver can be the father. I've represented a number of fathers, or the caregiver can be the mother. It isn't a gender-oriented thing. The ability to give love and take care of your children, that's a quality that can either happen in either gender. And those are the people that should be the primary caregivers without alienating the other parent. You know, both parents have a right to that kid, and that child, has a right to grow up knowing both parents.
Absolutely. One of the things that we get a little hung up on is you hear people coming out of court going, well, I won custody. And it sounds like custody is some huge trophy and that they're going to carry it around and show everybody that they got the prize. Custody is a term that describes a huge number of different arrangements. If you have your children with you 51% of the time, do you have custody? Well, I suppose you do. If you have custody of your children, you have your children 90% of the time. Do you have custody? Well, probably most certainly you do. So to simply say that the mothers tend to get custody more often than fathers do, maybe that is some form of analysis. I'm just not dead certain that it's a really useful one. And again, as Steve said, the child needs both parents.
Attorney Steve Fox and Attorney David Jefferies.
Well, you cut me off there before I
sorry.
finished the second portion of my question. Statistics show us, and the last time I called into your show, I recommended that you read Father and Child Reunion by Dr. Warren Farrell, and you told me you would, and quite obviously you haven't. Statistics show us, it's the result of 13 years worth of research to the both of you, 94% of the custodial parents in this country are the mothers.
Now, again, I don't know your statistics, but I would add, again, that at least in the Antelope Valley, that's not the case. Now, I do represent a lot of females. The majority of my clients are. And I do fight very dearly for the kids. But once again, I represent a number of males, too. And I think what the judge looks at the most is who's the caregiver.
Sure.
What's in the best interest of that kid? Now, I fought very hard recently in a case in front of actually Commissioner Amspoker where I argued for 50-50. And I won that case. Both parents went to the same employer. Both parents used the same babysitter. Both parents had the same exact schedule from the same employer. There was no reason that they shouldn't have had 50-50. In fact, the code suggests that. It doesn't happen too often from what I've seen, David. More often we get a case called Freeman Visitations, which is the non-custodial parent gets every other weekend, half the off-track time, alternating holidays, Father's Day, and their birthday. So to a good extent, that seems to be, but on the other hand, not every situation is the same. And sometimes I think we have to tailor-make the situation to fit the two parents and to fit the amount of kids and the type of kids they got.
Oh,
What's
sure.
your opinion,
Well,
David?
every parent and every child is quite unique. I probably should be more aware of what the statistics say, but I'm much more concerned with the next client that walks through the door and what their particular situation is and what their particular parenting desires are. Nobody in their right mind would look at the legal system, the family law court system, and say it's perfect in every way. But as society changes, there are a number of high-quality people involved in the family law court system that are doing their darndest to take minuscule resources in some cases and try and help people solve their problems.
We've got one more call, and we've got a break, David. Attorney Steve Fox and Attorney Dave Jefferies.
Lastly for you, the non-custodial parent, which I am trying to get you folks to examine, over 90% of the time, is the father in this case. Lastly for you, over 85% of all court-ordered child support in this country is indeed being collected. The non-custodial parent, sir, is the father in the majority of these cases.
Now, that is in a number of cases. I would agree when you had the old-fashioned mother as the homemaker stayed home and the father who went out and worked, but I think our society is changing. I got to be honest with you.
Heavens, look at the workforce that we have now. The days when dad was, quote, the breadwinner and mom puttered around I can think of 1950s television shows where that was depicted and people didn't burst out laughing. But you can talk about any community in California in this day and age. Most of us who are married are both spouses are working probably at least 40 hours a week. And the minute that happens, the level of cooperation necessary to raise children within a marriage and also thereafter has to be of a fairly high level. If the children of a marriage that has ended are going to really be nurtured by both parents, by virtue of the fact that both of them work, they need the partnership with the other parent.
Sure, you got to work together, and with that, we'll go to a break. Welcome back to the Steve and David Show, where you can get some free legal advice from two of your local attorneys. All you have to do is call 726-0382. And right now we're talking about family law, which we both practice. In fact, we've had head-to-head, and we've usually find ways to resolve it to the benefit of both our clients, I think.
More often now by sitting down and talking before either one of us gets a little angry. More often. That's
Before the faxes start flying and...
Well, see, the thing is a comment I made earlier. I don't think either one of us have got anything to prove to either one of us. So we don't have to go around acting like we think we're the kings of the hill or whatever. We just get down to business.
And I think the general theme is what's the best interest of the client?
Sure.
Can we resolve the dispute? Can we get them their fair and equitable share of the property?
Sure.
Unfortunately, property is the last usually dealt with in family law, and perhaps the way it should be, where children are the first. But a good chunk of divorce is dividing the treasures of the marriage.
Oh, certainly. And then you have the concepts of who owned what prior to marriage.
We call that the separate property.
The separate property. And what do you do? There's a rather classic case out there that I can't name because I don't remember case names very well. But there was a gentleman who had a Corvette, and he owned it before he got married. Only when he had it, it was a rolling rust bucket sitting in the backyard waiting for him to restore it. During the marriage, he restored it. It went from being something that was collecting rust into a classic automobile again.
That's the Penoyer versus Neff, the old cases,
Sure.
Community effort. I think a more common case is you start out with a separate property house, you get married, and all of a sudden the community payments are made on the separate property house.
Sure.
What is the community entitled to in return? And what I found in the code is the money made that went towards principal. You know,
Right.
in every house you
Principal
have maybe
reduction.
$1,000 payment and maybe only $100 as principal. The community is entitled to the reimbursement of the money that went towards the principal.
Sure. But you can see that we're now getting into concepts that are not going to be readily apparent to somebody who went to the library and bought a book, went to the clerk's office and gathered up some forms and now is trying to figure out what it is they're going to say to Commissioner Siegel on the date of their trial. When he asks them how they arrived at the division of the value of a family home in a case like you've just described, it's going to be a highly unusual individual who's going to be able to see through that fog of competing interests and be able to clearly and quickly express
Now, when
what
one
the
client
judge wants to hear.
is forced to pay support, do you think and the other client is living in the house with the children, do you think he should be able to pay the money directly to the house payment so that his credit doesn't get destroyed?
Well, again, we're in an area where there are two valid but competing interests. Certainly, it is a very primary concern to anybody going through a divorce that they try and have a credit rating that they can outlive and outlast.
And unfortunately, the credit history sometimes gets destroyed because of the divorce.
Unfortunately, more often than not, that's exactly what happens. So that's a valid concern. But support money is very special money. If you have an obligation to pay for virtually anything else, and you fall on hard times and you want to file a bankruptcy to get a fresh start, one of the unpleasant surprises people discover is that you're not going to get rid of a dime of your support obligation that has remained unpaid for years.
Speaking of support, there's another interesting thing I've noticed. Sometimes you might have an irresponsible other spouse, or so you think. and you buy the things for the kids directly for them, the coats, the shoes, and you give money to their baseball. The problem is that money will not be counted as your support.
It will not. It will not.
For better or for worse, to use those words, you have to give the money directly to the other spouse for it to be counted as support.
And you know, it doesn't take much time to say, get out the checkbook, write in the memo section, this is child support for December 2001, and you save yourself so many heartaches and so many dollars in legal fees when you can come to an attorney and say, look, I'm being accused of failing to pay my support. Here are the photocopies of the checks, and they're all there. They all line up. You've got it summarized. When an attorney is sitting there trying to tell somebody what needs to be done and trying to estimate the cost of it, the organized person that comes in and got photocopies of every single check, and the checks are in the right amount, and they're on time.
They're the ones who are ahead. Attorneys are only as good as the ammunition we're given.
Absolutely. And when I'm sitting there looking at somebody, the price in my head that I'm going to ask for to become the attorney for this person is dropping like a rock when I see somebody who understands what it is I need to do my job quickly and efficiently. And attorneys only sell one product. They sell time. If you use a little of their time, you get a little bill. You use a ton of their time, you're going to get a big bill.
I like to think there's unseen labor such as creativity, sitting and figuring out some way to deal with the other side. But I
Sure.
agree with you as far as what we're being hired for is per hourly rate.
That's the
or
way we
time.
bill. That's the way we bill. It's time.
Now-
If you come into any legal situation and you've spent the time to organize your side of the case before you meet the
Oh, you're
lawyer,
way ahead of the other side.
Sure, and he's going to start off with a respect for you and your opinion, and a belief that the partnership between you and your attorney is going to be one that's easily established and will work very, very fluidly. It's the way to do it. The people that come in and hand you a grocery bag full of faded out receipts, that's every attorney's nightmare.
Attorney Steve Fox and Attorney David Jefferies.
I just wanted to make a comment about, you had made a reference earlier concerning, there had been a caller about Mr. Cooley and locally appointed attorneys having judges and this and that. What I wanted to say was, I went through a situation where I had almost 10 years of litigation locally in family court, and I ultimately hired an attorney from West Los Angeles that came up. And at the end of the day's litigation, was asked by the clerk of the court, quote, don't you want to ask for a continuation, end quote? And my attorney said, no, we're through here for the day. And the comment was from the clerk of the court that he was the first private attorney that hadn't asked for a continuation. So the family law industry continues to feed upon itself. And
Well, let me just respond to a couple things. First of all, you're going to get less local judges because elections used to be locally. Now they're county-wide. So it's going to be more expensive for a local attorney to run for judge. So I think you're going to see the end of local judges, even though I frankly favor them. As for continuances, I used to be a claims adjuster, and everything I did was, let's get an ending, let's get the settlement. And I try to do my family law the same way, where you don't need to have it go on forever. So I tend to agree with you in that concept to end the people's misery as quick as possible to resolve the dispute.
But my point was that the clerk of the court said, admittedly, that there had been that this was the first private attorney in their experience as being clerk of the court that hadn't asked for a continuation. So the Copes and the Curtins and the Weavers and the Foxes of the world continued to make money off of the misery and, continuation.
I'd like to respond to
Go
that
ahead.
because you didn't name my name, but you might well have. We don't make money off the continuances. The fact of the matter is that most people in the Antelope Valley cannot afford to have a divorce case go much beyond a year to 14 months.
I like to keep within the 6 months minimum
Right.
that's allowable.
If we have a case that goes beyond that, do we end up billing for the time that we put in past that? Sure we do. Do we ever collect most of that billing?
Doubtful.
No, we don't.
Most
okay?
of our clients can't afford that much, and we try to do a good job and do it as quick as possible because the clients, they shouldn't have to pay, and the truth is they don't have the funds. Most of the time I end up, believe it or not, over half the time, the other side's dropped their client. I'm the only attorney, and I sit them down. I try to get them to resolve their dispute.
Okay. The other thing is, if you polled the attorneys up here and asked them would they like to have 3 more family law judges available so that Commissioner Siegel's caseload, which is incredibly
About
harsh,
50-some cases a day, where LA you only have about 12.
we would love to try every case the day we go in there, the first time we go in there. There are no judges available to us most of the time.
Attorney Steve Fox and Attorney David Jefferies.
Good evening. My question is, I am recently divorced for about a year and a half, and last year I filed income tax, and I included my son on mine. Now, I have my child 85% of the time through the system after that was proven, and I just received a letter from the IRS stating that he
Let me
was
answer.
listed. My ex, who's in the movie business and was out of town for 5 months, and has them every other weekend, also claimed him.
Let me answer that because I actually did some research on that one. It's not in the family law code, it's in the IRS code.
Right.
And what it is if you have the child and you have primary custody, you have the right to the tax deduction. The fact that he's erroneously claimed the child has red flagged it to the IRS, but you're the one who's done the appropriate thing.
And after all, he's in a very creative business. He filed a very creative tax return, and he's going to have to pay back any money that he didn't pay as a result of that.
Oh, you made my Christmas. You don't want to hear from those people right before Christmas. And then I'm thinking, I have to go back to court.
They are a kind of friendlier IRS of late.
I hope you're right.
They are.
Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
And I'm Attorney Steve Fox and Attorney David Jefferies.
Yeah, a question for you guys. What do you suggest that a client do, or somebody who's working through the court system that has been, let's say, repeatedly had their final trial date reset 5, 6, 7 times the annual value?
I feel for you because I like to try my cases, and I go there only to find that they've either overbooked or the case from the day before is still in trial. You can sometimes, if both attorneys agree, bump it over to another judge. We have Commissioner Amspoker, and we had Commissioner KPAL up to the 31st, but the truth is Commissioner Siegel really is the best judge in the family law area.
By far.
Not putting down any other judge. The problem is you can lobby to get us some more judges up here.
Please do. There are 500,000 people up here, probably, if they were all really counted. We have one judicial officer with established credentials to do a difficult family law trial. Just look at the numbers. It's impossible. We should have at least 2 or 3 more. The only way that's going to happen is if the people in the Antelope Valley stop complaining about it and start writing letters and start talking to their
Board of
representatives,
Supervisors,
insisting that we are not just to be left up here in the high desert and ignored. We pay our taxes. We're entitled to have public services.
David, give your own office number before we leave.
No, I'm not going to. Merry Christmas. You'll find us in the phone book.
Again, have a happy holiday, and God bless and good night.